report about what that looks like. Um, okay, so a little bit here, how to utilize Berkeley PTA Council. First off, the listserv is a great place it's a resource to ask questions or get information. If you are not already, you can either email me directly, or you can email me at president@berkeleypta.org, and I can add you to our list. To be honest, if you ever want off that list, you also need to say something, because we don't actually clean it up very easily, because we don't know lots of the people that are on there. And it's also helpful for me to say out loud, there are a lot of people on that list, right? So know that when you do write something there, it is a list of like, what, 400 people or something like that you're messaging. It's not just current Berkeley PTA Council people. So just know that you're casting a wide net. There's a lot of information to be gathered. We sometimes have people who are no longer in PTAs that respond back with lots of helpful information. But it's a very big group that you're messaging. Don't let that intimidate you. Like, everyone's been in your position, and if you have questions, it's a great place to get them answered. We will occasionally ask you to forward information on to your school's e-trees. And like I said, I'm really trying to put together sort of like a communications email. So we have point people from each school that do the newsletters or whatever e-trees that you have for your school. But we will also be asking you directly to email things out to them.
Hey, Rita, can I stop you right there? Can you share does everyone see, we're not seeing the one slide, we're seeing multiple slides. Is everyone seeing that as well? Yeah.
Okay, well, how do I do that? You know what? Di, I'm going to ask you to share it, because I don't think I know I don't know what I'm doing different. I closed it, and I'll stop my share.
This is a perfect time for Mandisa to introduce herself, since she's
there you go.
Oh, yeah, is she back? Yes, fabulous. Mandisa, do you have a second to check in and give us your introduction?
Of course I do. Good evening. I'm here at the Peralta training, and I had to pick up some sheets for BAM, which I'm on the executive board with BAM as a historian. And I go by she, her, woman, mother. You know, I was a woman first before I was a mother. Either way, I love BAM because my oldest daughter graduated from BAM, and she's at Berkeley High School now. My youngest daughter's in the fourth grade at BAM, and that's how I met Rita and Di and all these wonderful people. And what did I do? We went to the beaches. We just, laid back beaches. We went to the state fair. This is the first time we went to Sacramento State Fair.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, just, local stuff. And it was good. Thank you.
Okay, so Di, thank you for stopping me, since I wasn't presenting like the slide.
So do you see my slide now?
Yes. So I think another component of what you can utilize PTA Council for is we've got some direct communication to the superintendent and the school board. Di and I will be presenting, actually, hopefully within the next month or so, to the school board. We have reserved time at every school board meeting. We don't use it very often. So far, we've only done a few report outs there, but that's, again, part of our plan is to do that more. And again, when there are issues that affect sort of district-wide at a PTA level, we're happy to bring those up as well. What else? Collaboration across school sites is, I think, the biggest thing that we're able to do really well, which is at these meetings and outside these meetings, again, create communications so that we can share information. Again, all of us only being in these roles for a couple years, it's not a lot of time to feel like you got your feet under you and then all of a sudden you're done and passing it on to somebody else. And so having, again, this wealth of resources here is really great. We're hoping that every school site has a liaison, either specifically a liaison, or that the president or secretary can be sent from each school to come to our meetings. We say on here the meetings are the fourth Monday of the month, but I already know next month we're likely to need to move that. So maybe before we end tonight, we can kind of get a consensus. My thought was, so I think it's Rosh Hashanah is on, or the first day of Rosh Hashanah, I believe, is on September. You guys see me squinting at my calendar? Is it September 22nd? So if we could move to the fourth Monday of next month, we might be trying to do that. But again, we can talk about that more as we go through things here tonight. Yeah, and so those are sort of overall ways to utilize PTA Council. So, and Mandisa is at a Peralta meeting tonight. Peralta is the level above council, and they give us a lot of guidance about how to run a PTA. And I will say that historically, there is guidance that we take from them, and there is guidance that we don't. And we can get into more details about that. But I think, like, you know, as we go through things, especially when we start talking about how we do things differently in terms of fundraising and budgeting than maybe what they would recommend. Di, is there more in there that I should be? Yes. So there's a link right there that Di just put in the chat for more resources from Peralta District. Is there more to be said tonight about Peralta?
I think just in general, we get questions on how to treat certain expenses or like how a PTA should function. Oftentimes when people have questions, I actually go to Peralta online resources and I query the question. So I don't know if people just want to, you know, bookmark that. It is a good general guidance. I don't follow it to the letter of their law, but it's good to have that in your back pocket.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. So yes, we do report to Peralta. Again, it's a complex relationship. Certain things that we have to follow are things like paying dues and our bylaws, which last year there was a big push to get us all back in compliance with up-to-date bylaws. I know a lot of people were able to successfully do that. And if anybody hasn't yet, you know, connecting with some of the resources from Peralta might be really useful for that. There's also guidance we choose not to follow. So Peralta would say, do not pay for staff positions for a lot of rather good reasons. And it is something that most school districts do not do. And we say, we don't care, we're doing it anyway, right? And we fundraise at a level that we're able to put money towards staff positions, and so a lot of schools do it. Peralta also would say to have a small PTA for each school. Some of the PTAs at our schools have 40 and 50 people on them, or even more, and they think that's not part of their guidance. So yeah, that would be something else that many of our schools choose not to follow. And again, you know, it's guidance. It's not, doesn't have to be a certain way. It sometimes creates a bit of conflict when we submit certain things, but again, it's, yeah, there's guidance that we have to follow and some that we don't. Let's see.
Lindsay's got her hands raised.
Yeah, go ahead, Lindsay.
I was wondering, for the Peralta guidance, some of it like is stuff that, you know, they recommend and you know, our PTAs ignore. But I'm wondering, like, when is it stuff that we should be paying more attention to? For instance, the state PTA says that we should run 3 community events for every fundraiser. And I know Peralta does that too, because it helps protect the 501c3 status, the nonprofit status of the organization. Like, when are the things that Peralta is telling us to do and we ignore, like things that we should actually consider changing our ways on?
You know, that's a really good point. I mean, I think that, again, like, there are schools that fall more in line with what they say. I mean, I think across the board, we fundraise at a level that they find, I don't know what the right word is, off the charts. And so it means we are doing things with that money that they would recommend not doing. But for things like that, that's an interesting point. And I don't know, I mean, that probably deserves more discussion than just
Can I
me
chime in?
talking here. Yeah, go ahead.
I think, and this has been based on being a treasurer for Craigmont for a couple of years. You know, we're all 501c3s. You know, we're our own nonprofits. We have to file our own tax returns, and you know, we have to report to the state. And so if we violate, you know, those rules that a 501c is supposed to do, we're supposed to serve our mission. You know, you have to record things a certain way. You have to file your tax returns, all that stuff. The school can lose their 501c3. So, and thus you're not a nonprofit, you can't get donations, you can't, or deductible donations, et cetera. And so to answer, I guess to answer your question, Lindsay, I think it is up to each school to protect that overall. And Peralta is there to guide you. Because they're not enforcing, you know, the IRS rules, because that's what our 501c3 is. IRS rules that allows you to act as a nonprofit.
So could we, as a Berkeley council, be more explicit in our guidance around like protecting the 501c3 status? Like, for example, there's a relatively new form that the state of California is requiring for charities, you know, and some of our local PTAs got notices of delinquency telling them to stop their charitable actions until they settled it. And I know that one of our schools didn't stop, you know, after they were told to by the state. You know, how can we as a council help keep a calendar or something of like forms for compliance, or reminders about the balance of community events to fundraising events? Like, these are important things that I think also make our communities more difficult. You know, when a PTA becomes only a fundraising entity, then it drives people away, in my opinion.
So I think maybe so I've got a couple thoughts. One is that there is a calendar for treasurers that is updated yearly with when certain things need to happen on a treasurer level. I don't know if I mean, the treasurer role is big enough already. I don't know that adding more things to that calendar is a reasonable thing. Although as I was looking through different schools, officers, I saw a lot of schools have broken the treasurer role up across a bunch of different, like maybe 2 or 3 people, which I think is a great idea. But so that might be worth considering, is adding other deadlines and things like that into the treasurer role or onto the treasurer calendar. Adam, I will put that, I will try and put that out to the chat. It's on the Peralta website. But I don't think I can talk and search at the same time. That's one of my thoughts, Lindsay, to what you're saying. The other thought I had is I know that we have in the spring a couple of spots open for sort of discussions at council. That might be a really helpful thing to do, is just have that be something that, you know, that month's conversation at council is about some of these issues, because I think that, you know, that speaks to the sort of component of you know, shared information and dissemination of information that is part of our mission. And I know I just missed 2 comments. Oh no, just one. Okay, you got that die, cool. Let's see. So I think these are sort of the hot topics. Di sent around a survey, and I believe these are the hot topics that came up based on that survey. Is that right?
Yes, these were some of the topics. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, and I think this has also informed our calendar for our topics for the year. Next month, I'm hoping to have folks come from the after school program, but also from, like I said, Parks and Rec through City of Berkeley to sort of get updates from Bears and Learns, but also to problem solve a little bit, like I said, the transportation issues, you know, as things roll out here, because I know, well, yeah, so that's upcoming for next month. And
Could
then,
we add transportation in general to that slide also? Just because it's like they cut the transportation to all the after school things, but they also cut bus stops. And
yeah,
that seems very challenging to do when you don't have neighborhood schools and when you've had compliance issues for attendance. You know, one of the key ways to get kids to attend school on a regular basis is to provide transportation. Thank you, Di. I saw that you replied.
yeah, and I mean, that might be another, like, well, so again, I don't know that we have our calendar listed in so far because we're still working on formalizing our speaker list. But having someone from transportation come to council to have some more conversation about this and get some answers around that, I think is going to be really helpful. We went and talked, we didn't go, we had a video conversation with the superintendent, was that 2 weeks ago now? To check in a little bit. And, you know, that, again, that was a big issue that came up when we talked with her as well. I don't know, Di, do you remember getting the whys around the transportation other than budget?
No, I don't recall diving deep into that. No.
Yeah, but definitely talking about that as an issue. So again, she'll be coming to speak with us, I believe, in October. So continuing that conversation there, I think is going to be really helpful as well. Facilities is another thing. You know, again, Longfellow and Sylvia Mendez are the two schools that we highlight right now, but there are multiple schools on the list for construction projects. And so these are issues that are going to be hitting schools across the board at one time or another. So we're hoping to get some construction project updates. Well, I think we said at the November, December meeting.
Rita, I had asked Jennifer if she could give a quick overview. She's here, and she said she would be happy to, you know, at the stop be
that would be
give us an
fantastic.
overview.
Thank you so much.
A couple of minutes, yeah.
Do you want me to do that now? Sorry.
Yes,
be
that
wonderful.
would be wonderful.
Sure. So facilities stuff, I think we are pretty on track as far as I have been told. We have a facilities subcommittee meeting at the end of September. So we haven't had an official meeting in a while. But we just passed a shift to the funding for Longfellow at our last board meeting, which is going to allow some of the demolition and some of the work on Longfellow to continue while we wait for DSA, that's the Department of State Architecture, to approve the extended plans on Longfellow. So Longfellow, I was told last week, is on track still. The timing looks like 2027, fall 2027. And Sylvia Mendez is also on track. We are, working hard to finish the building. So the first phase, the first half is done, and it's still an active construction site. And so the other half is happening now at Sylvia Mendez. We also, over the summer, broke ground on the staff housing. So that's at the adult school or Longfellow at San Pablo. So that construction is underway. You can see it. But there's a huge sound wall that's separates the Longfellow Middle School from that construction site. And we don't actually that construction is not BUSD construction. It's just on our property. And then the other one that we broke ground over the summer was some work at the Little Theater at Berkeley High to expand the number of single stall, well, actually multi-stall, gender neutral bathrooms on that campus. So that was a big, has been a big issue. So those are the big projects that are happening right now. Over summer, people will be happy to know we did a huge heat mitigation project. So you'll see ceiling fans in a lot of the buildings now that didn't used to have them. So that was a huge project that happened over the summer as well. And if there are specific questions, I'm happy to, and tell you everything I know.
Do we have any other questions from anyone, maybe specifically from either Longfellow or from Sylvia Mendez? Or Berkeley High, if the Little Theater stuff is affecting anybody?
I have a question actually, Jennifer, if you know. I know that the windows leak pretty badly at the adult school where Longfellow is right now, and that was a project that had to be put on hold because of the kids there. And so I know that the funding for facilities is kind of like running out, and some projects had to be put on hold even longer. And I'm wondering if there's plans to continue to use it as a flex site, or to put BAS back in there or whatever. Either way, that seems like something of a priority. Did it get bumped? Is it still on the list? Like,
it's still on the list. It did not get bumped. And yeah, the big project that got bumped was Emerson's modernization. So that was like the last thing on the list, and so that got bumped. But we plan to go out for another bond and have that be a top priority there. And we can't, just so people know, anyone that's new, like we can't go into an active school site and do construction like that. And in fact, we can't even like do it over the summer, because when you start touching school sites, what happens is you can't just like go in, you can't even change a bathroom stall door legally without getting new drawings and new approval from the Department of State Architecture, which requires you to bring everything up to code. And a lot of our buildings are old, so they're safe, but like the code has changed. And so something that you would think is small or you could do at your house that's, pretty easy, becomes just really challenging when we try to do it. So some of those things, it's for the good, because you're improving, accessibility and safety in all of our school sites, but it makes things really cumbersome.
Any other issues around construction that we should touch bases on? Di, can we go back to one more thing about, I guess we don't have to go back, but the other topic on here is budget cuts. And one of the things I learned from being on the Superintendent Budget Advisory Committee last year is that this is sort of like, while we have certain deadlines to submit budgets, and which we should talk more about tonight a little bit, it's also always kind of a rolling issue as well. Cuts can come at any time. And so that might be something to consider in terms of, or maybe that's something that's coming up more Di, do you have that later as a topic, or is that something we should touch on right now?
Well, so that's our second slide deck where we're going to kind of go over our,
Okay.
our funding sources. But I know I sent out that deck for folks to review before the meeting. So I wonder if we can maybe it'd be better for us to spend the time asking folks if they have questions after have reviewed the deck.
Okay. So then I guess let's move on to our calendar. So this is our working calendar right now. Honestly, Di, can you shift the view so that it can just be on the slide? Because I actually can't read that. There we go.
There you go.
Thank you. Even with my glasses on, man. So if you think about our calendar across the year, right? Here we are, end of August. People are probably passing their budgets that they proposed last spring. We've got all sorts of back to school events, nominating and electing school site committees. And again, like I said, we're hoping to have representatives come here to council for both the superintendent, and also we're hoping to get Chris Albeck back, and we're hoping to have some report outs from Learns, and then again from facilities. On our calendar as well, tax filings are due. Units reporting due, start nominating next school year. Think about your per caps. Per caps, I believe, is due mid-December. There's an early submission for per caps, I think in October. If you want to get it done early, that would be fantastic. Let's see. And then, right, when we head into winter, it's starting the budgeting process, nominating new committee officers for next year already, right? Thinking about budgets due to BUSD. This component here, PTA budgets due to BUSD and writing checks to BUSD, this is something that also came up in our conversation a couple of weeks ago with the superintendent around, it's always a big, what is the right way to put it? It brings up a lot when people get pink slipped, right, in the spring, because we don't necessarily know if we will have funding for them. And there were cuts made to positions this year, which was very stressful, but almost as stressful is the number of people who get pink slipped and then the pink slips get rescinded. It's great that they get rescinded, but it's a very stressful process. And one way for us to aid in some of that on a very slight level is to get our checks in early, right? So if anybody is paying for staff positions, getting those in before March 15th means that those positions that PTAs are funding don't get pink slipped. Okay. And, I know a lot of people say, not a lot of people, I know that there's conversations year to year about how sometimes the deadlines for these checks get earlier. Several years ago, when I first started coming to these meetings, one of the conversations was, why do some schools have earlier deadlines than others? The reason for that is that if you bounce a check to the school district, that deadline gets earlier and earlier, right? So keeping that in mind, right, we want to make sure our checks don't bounce. We want to make sure that our checks are getting in as early as they can for the next school year. Okay. And again, we'll be firming up our calendar and updating as we go. I think the one calendar thing, like I said, that I want to make sure we get to is if we can come to consensus about having our next meeting on, like I said, is it September 29th? Is that something that folks, we have a quick check-in around that? Maybe let's stop sharing for a minute. Scott
Can I
says
ask
thumbs
a
up.
quick question?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, like, how many schools follow this calendar? Because I'm seeing this and this, like, I'm texting with Adam, my treasurer. We are so off. Like, I did my budget in June and like we nominated PTA officers in like the very end of May. It was like right before we leave. And I'm just, is it just my school or is that common? I can't, I'm so surprised.
It's one of those, well, so it's one of those things where I think the suggestions around getting started with these things earlier, like I think, oh my gosh. So some schools do this, and I don't know that all do, but like before starting the budget for the next year is to sort of review budget priorities and to have a working group around that. So I know I participated in that at one of my schools several years ago. I don't know that that necessarily needs to happen every year, but it certainly sort of reprioritizes what you're thinking about for going into building the next year's budget. And again, like if you manage to find your officers and you started in May, that's fantastic. But I think a lot of schools really struggle with trying to find officers for the next year, right? And so, having a nominating committee that starts, say, in March, February, right? The other thing it allows for is a little bit of shadowing before really passing the baton to the next person, right? If I knew I was going to be doing this, I would have shadowed Taesung way more closely. Speaking of which, is anyone with a student coming to Berkeley High and want to join BPTA, say next year? Next year?
Does someone here, ex-treasurer, want to elaborate why, we have discussions in budget in February and March, and you actually have to pass the budget, say, with your existing PTA in April and May, because you have to fund that following year to the district by May. And then when you come back in the fall, because you have a new constituent body, right? Because the fifth graders have now left, and now you have kinder family who are now your PTA. In the fall, you officially approve that budget that the previous PTA had encumbered the new PTA group with. I don't know if anyone can elaborate a little better about that process.
I can if you want, Di.
Thank you, please. Thank you.
So, so budgets are tricky because, as we acknowledged, the timelines never really match up for when you need to get your checks in and all that kind of stuff, especially if you're funding anything via BUSD. So, the best practice is to sometimes budget a couple of years in advance so that you can send those checks in really early. So the idea is that the membership of last year worked on a budget and drafted it using the funds that they had fundraised that year, right, for the following academic year. And then when the membership changes the next school year, that group with the new TKers and Kers and the exiting fifth graders, or if you're in middle school, you can do the grade levels. That community must agree to that budget or amend it. And you can amend your budgets at any time. So you're not stuck with anything at any time. But the reason you do that is because the current community has to approve that. And so you really should be going through that approved budget, not just rubber stamping it, but actually reviewing it with each set of community members. Did I muddle things more or did I make it more clear? I can't
Actually, I
tell.
think that's really helpful. I mean, I'm getting a lot of tips. So this is great.
I don't know, Rita, if you have any more for this slide. I do want to put in just a call out. If folks have topics or people you think that is worthy of folks coming to council to speak about, please let Mirita know. We'll try to contact them to come to one of our meetings, if only for 20 minutes. Okay. I'm gonna move on. So Rita, this is the deck about, you know, funding. I don't know, do you want to start? Do people have questions? Do they have time to look over this, or do you want us to share and kind of quickly go through it? I'm doing a time check. It's 8:30.
I think with only half an hour left and wanting to save some time at the end, why don't we just move through it, and I'll try and also, folks, anybody else who has, I mean, again, I've been on board here for a little while, but there are totally people here who probably have more knowledge than me about budgets and how our budget works. So take this with my handful of salt that I'm doing my best in walking folks through this. And I feel like there's a lot I'm still learning.
So do folks have questions? Do they want to dive into that? I'll share that deck right now, unless folks want to have questions they want to ask. If I can find it now. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, but I need you to make it bigger. Hit that slideshow button.
Okay.
Okay. Whew. Okay, so almost half our budget comes from the state. Thinking about timelines around that is kind of interesting, right? They're also always looking kind of a year ahead. So I'll be starting with our superintendent's committee, I think in October, to start meeting to build the budget for next year. And all of that is on the proposed is not the right word. Perspective? There's a better word for that. Sorry, my brain's not functioning so well at 8:33. But we have numbers from the state that constantly get updated from the governor's office about what the budget, the money that we're getting for that largest portion, right? We start getting them, I think, in January, and then periodically every month or so. When you look at the smaller pieces of this pie here, I think it's helpful to keep in mind, if you see that 7.8% is the federal revenue, that's pretty small. That is, I think, mostly for school lunches and for IEP and 504 accommodations.
And Rita, if I can add, so we asked the superintendent about this, because when we left school in June, we were unsure about, you know, with all the DEI issues and our current administration threatening to pull funds. And the superintendent came out and made that statement that Berkeley is holding strong to our mission and our values. And if we had to, we would look for other funds. They were looking at Plan B if that 7.8 million were to be pulled. So when we asked her this week, you know, had things changed? And she said, we're still getting funding. So whether that was a threat or rescinded, whatnot, so it's on their radar. And she's also working with the state to see if they can get other grants, other funds, if that issue did come out from the federal government. So. Yeah.
Another larger chunk on this pie is the BSAP funding at 16%. Right, that is, you know, measure E1, I believe. So I don't know if you guys remember this, but like I think they just passed that again, repassed it again last fall, which funds it for another 7 years. Again, please don't quote me. I know I'm being recorded and transcribed and all of this, but also still don't quote me. But I think it's another 7 years that's been passed for. So we get 16% of our budget from that. It doesn't fund everything it could fund. It could fund more for things like, I mean, it largely, I think most schools use it for the music program and to keep class sizes small. And those are the sort of two biggest things that we do with our BSAP money. But it could be used to fund library and counseling and all sorts of other services and supports as well. But I think that's not the, when we think about all the different schools and how the school site councils and principals work to build budgets at a school level, they use different monies to plug different holes. And so again, this is sort of like the big pie for how BUSD budget works. And then it gets translated a little bit differently at different schools.
And a little wedge of this is our PTA budget. We raise over $2 million across our schools. And so last year when they were looking for $7 million of cuts, they were relying on our $2 million to help with that, right? So
yeah, like we support, I mean, again, that 2 million actually is a couple years old now too. But yeah, like it's looking at how much we're able to support as well. Okay, so again, like it's not like all the money, I mean, and this isn't, if we go back to that one real quickly here, if we, or maybe it's the same slide, where do funds come into? So something else I think that's helpful to consider with this is that this is not what other school districts' budgets look like, right? We have a lot, I mean, again, for a lot of schools, that state funding piece of the pie is a much bigger wedge. So here in Berkeley, we're very lucky to have supplemental monies coming in from a lot of different places. One of the ones, and I'm not even sure which one it is our garden programs are funded in part by the soda tax. Now, unfortunately, we're all drinking less soda. Dang it. Because the soda tax is working, but that means a little bit less money for gardens. So maybe we should drink more soda. I don't know. I'm not gonna, again, don't quote me on that. I'm nobody's dentist. Where do funds come from into BUSD? Again, most from the state, a large chunk from BSAP, Berkeley Educators Recruitment and Retention Act, Measure E, Facilities Safety Management Act, Measure H, and PTA funds are some of the biggies, right? We've got oversight committees. One of the things that Peralta District doesn't like about us fundraising and then funding staff positions is some PTAs then feel like they should have influence over the staff that get hired. And that's not the case, right? Like that's a principal decision. If you want to have some influence over things like that though, PTA is not the place to be. School site council is. So, again, here we are, we're about building community. We're here to support schools and students. And we do fundraise. And if you want to be more on where the spending happens, school site council is the avenue for you. We also have the parent advisory committee. We have planning and oversight over BSEP and BIRA. And then again, like I said, anybody can attend the superintendent budget advisory committee meetings, but there are only like representatives from these other places and the unions that are voting members of that committee. But anyone can attend, and they even take public comment at the beginning. Okay, school site council. Do we want to go into the details of each of these groups? Di, do we have time for that? Yeah, kind of. Maybe if anyone from okay. I was going to say, if anybody from some of these different group organizations wants to jump in and say something about them, that might be helpful. A school site council is what drives budgets at a school level, right? Okay, so here's a summary of school site plan budgets across schools, right? BAM did not have $0 coming from their PTA. That's not right. Anyway, you guys can look more closely at some of these.
Could you, since I'm new to this, do you mind like just helping me understand like how should I be thinking about this when I'm looking at the differences between schools, and is there something that it should allow me to question?
So I think the biggest thing, so okay, maybe stop sharing for a second, Di. This is like, here is what I have garnered over the last several years, and then maybe other people can speak to this a little bit too, because again, should not be the only one answering a question like that. But what I have garnered is and certainly at an elementary school level, a little bit at a middle school level too. Every school has slightly different funding priorities, and it's up to the principal to build a budget around those priorities. You know, when you're building a budget at your school, usually you're working on a committee and saying like, you know, yes, no, here are the things we are willing to fund. When things come up over the course of a year, if it's more money than I think $500 or some really tiny amount, you have to vote at the PTA level or even at the school level to approve expenses like that being paid for by the PTA. Excuse me. But largely when you think about like how our schools do differ, you know, I've interviewed several principals at different schools, kind of getting their thoughts on some of this, and it's pretty interesting to hear a bit about that. Again, I don't want to delve too much into the weeds here, but like I talked to one principal who is like, yeah, this is the principal from Ruth Actie, and they have the smallest achievement gap, which is why I was interviewing her, because and she said, yeah, we don't have the outside arts programming that some of the other schools do. We spend all of our instructional minutes on instructional time. She also does some other things like she uses some monies to pay teachers to tutor kids after school, but she actually said that it's the using of doing more informed testing and using measures like that to do more supplemental work with kids, but then also that the way they design their school week is just different because they're not having, say, Kala Arts come in and do an art class once a week, or I don't know, BAM's had Destiny Arts come in and do movement classes and some other programming like that. And she said, we don't use instructional minutes for that. And, they use their, I don't know if you guys, Prop 28 was for adding arts curriculum. They use that money towards, I think it's kinder, 4th and 5th grade to do, I think it's some sort of art movement, like performance art, so that they're getting PE met with that arts money, right? So that's sort of one example of how one principal decides to build a budget with those priorities in mind. Now, every principal has different priorities that they have for their school. A lot of that tends to be based very historically on what they've always done. And some schools make movements in different directions. Again, we get turnover in principals frequently enough that it is going to influence what things look like. And the priorities of the PTA. Again, PTAs have this budget and they're like, we've been funding this for the last 15 years, so we're going to keep funding it, right? If it's a line item in your budget, it's likely to be continued to be used. However, again, like it's the principal who really puts that, and the school site committee that really put that together. Please, again, like I don't want to be the only one talking here, so please other people say things.
If I can add an example. So when that art fund bond came into play, PTA had been funding a lot of art. And so understanding that the art bond was going to be able to pay for some of the art alleviated some of the PTA contributing to that art position, because they pushed back and said, hey, the art bond should pay for some of this. Can we make this work? And so it took away some of the fundraising pressure on the PTA. So it does, it is confusing, but this information that the spreadsheet that we put together is on the BUSD website. And this is what the principals submit to the district. And this is what is comes back to us when Harvey Young says, you owe me you know, $200,000. It's based on this plan that the principal submitted and said, this is what the PTA is paying for, but we're covering all the other things via these buckets of money. So that's the value of
that's why
understanding
BAM
that.
is zero. That's why BAM is zero, because they don't pay for positions. They contract with organizations, but they do not pay for positions. So that's interesting. That would be why they didn't, because they didn't have to cut a check that way. They fill those positions using the other buckets of money that are available
Because
to
those
them.
positions need to be hired through BUSD. They do fingerprinting. They have to become BUSD employees. That's why it was zero. Whereas in contractors were different. So it's complicated.
Different process.
Yes.
Okay, in our last 12 minutes left, what I'm trying to think of how best to use our
Well, we have more of
time
our
here.
agenda we wanted to cover, or questions. I wanted, you know, let other folks jump in. I'm not going to share anymore. Let me go back to our agenda, some of the things we said we wanted to cover. We touched base on the feedback from the superintendent in our meeting. We said learns, we wanted to come back because it's the after school crisis, for at least for elementary schools. Let's see, we said budget update, OFI cuts. I don't know if schools are concerned with staffing cuts of their OFIs. I know that schools have, the OFIs have been reallocated. Some schools have an OFI, some don't. So those were the topics we had on our agenda. I don't know, folks, what would you like to dive into in our time? Or if you have other questions or issues. Or we continue sharing this slide and dive back into the budget. Because I do think it's worthy. Rita and I looked at last year and we said we needed to spend some more time because we spent so much time on budgets last year that to set this foundation of understanding where funds come, it's worth it.
Well, and again, I think the other, like I said earlier, you know, the wrap back around here on some of this with our PTA budgets and why, you know, cutting those checks earlier is so important is because we don't want to pink slip anybody that doesn't have to be pink slipped at a BUSD level. And if we are contributing money to BUSD for a position, getting that in as soon as possible, again, earlier than what our usual deadline might be, is really valuable.
So to say it another way, Rita, basically for next year's positions, you want to have that in this year's budget so that you can cut that check in March and you're not running up against issues with current and next and all that kind of stuff. Your work with any positions that you're funding through BUSD, you are working basically 2 years ahead.
But I think that like misses the point that our principal didn't know how much we needed to give her until like May 10th, and the check was due May 11th. So like we couldn't write the check she wanted. Like we had the PTA budget set that would accommodate the check, but she couldn't give us the number that she needed the check to be for until the like beginning of May.
And there's a history of them not refunding you if you overpay them or being clear on how much you actually owed them and then giving you that money back. So it can feel really hard to, you know, estimate your best guess and without concrete information. I think that this is a solid piece of feedback to bring back to, you know, the finance office.
Yeah, I think that was a win last year. I felt really good that we got Harvey Young because he would just send out emails and said, you owe me $2 million. And we said, whoa, what are you talking about? We made them reconcile, and we told the superintendent, and we were able to get refunds and, get the right amounts. So I do feel us as a collective was able to do that successfully for the first time last year, I felt. So Rita, I think like for the next slides, I think the overall arching message here is there's a lot of oversight. So PTAs going back to their groups and saying, hey, we need folks who join these oversight committees because they're important to understand and bring back to your PTAs and to understand what's going on.
I don't know about other people's screens, but mine is just black and it says that your screen, you've started sharing, but I don't actually have any slides in.
Oh gosh, okay. Let's see.
But it also might just be me. My computer, I realized, is like.
Do folks see the sharing? Sorry.
It's not just you, Rita. It's black for us too.
Okay, my bad. Okay, it's paused. That's why. Sorry, I'm having.
It says double click to enter. Okay, never mind.
Okay, no, sorry. Let me share screen. This. Okay, do you see it now?
Nope. And again, if not, we really do just have a few more minutes left.
Yeah.
Di, if you're looking at it and want to just sort of sum up those last couple of slides.
Okay. It just talks about, the value of SBAC. Who are, you touched based on it earlier, Rita, who are the voting members? It's the African American Success Advisory Committee, the PACT, District English Learner Advisory Committee, Planning and Oversight, Gender Equity and Sexual Harassment Advisory Committee, Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervention Services, and BPTA Council. So that's us. And Lindsay, thank you for being the alternative. But so the SBAC group is for the superintendent, having the ear of the superintendent, and you're having a vote as to her general fund, because the general fund is a huge bucket. And based on your feedback, and she did say that, she's like, it's just feedback. They ultimately make the decision. So,
they make a decision, and I think parent influence is important, but it's also important to remember that there are, I think, gosh, someone else is going to say this and be more right than I am. I think there's 4 different unions represented in there as well. So it's juggling a lot of different perspectives at that meeting. It is really interesting if people have time and interest and want to join at some point. Like I said, it's fascinating. But yeah, then the voting members are across those other committees and then also those different unions. So you kind of get different perspectives. For a while, we were voting using different things on the keyboard so everyone could see how everyone voted, and I found that really fascinating to see what different union members were saying about different issues. But
I do have a slide here about the oversight, and you guys have this. I'm going to put in the chat. How about that? But it is a commitment. You guys start in January, and it goes into June.
For budget advisory or for other things?
Budget Superintendent Budget Advisory Committee.
October.
Oh, is it
That's
October? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And just to mention, there are other committees, BOC, there's a ton of BOC committees. There's the Superintendent's African American Success Advisory Committee. That's been a huge 3-year BOC commitment. That's on the superintendent's radar. There's the BOC Reparations Task Force, and there's the BOC Literacy Action Plan. So those are on the superintendent's radar, and they all want committee members. So yeah, a lot for your PTAs to see if they want to jump on. And I will shoot this out to like, hey, where can you get some volunteers?
It's helpful to think about having people from those committees come back to the PTA and talk about what's happening within those committees. I think, again, thinking about your PTA meetings and the sort of bi-directional information that can be passed is really, really a valuable thing.
Yeah. So, you know, all of this that we've shared, I'm hoping you guys have the slides, and based on the minutes I'm going to write, you can share some of this information with your PTAs at your PTA meetings and see if anything sticks. It's a lot. But that is Rita and I's goal, is to educate, and it's complicated. And the more people we get to get involved, the better we are off. Yeah. Okay. So that's the end of that slide.
Okay, so just writing. Oh, Nicole, you're on AASAC. Cool. Yeah. And so again, like, it's great to have people who are serving a multiple, you know, because you're also then on King's PTA, and being able to then bring information back and forth is so helpful and valuable. Yeah. Anything we should check in on before we wrap up for tonight? We will see you all, what did I say, the 28th?
Yeah. We got a couple of thumbs up. So I'm going to shoot that out there for the new date.
Okay. And I will reach out to Brazil and Kelly. And
I'm bummed. I was happy to see Berkeley High. I wanted to hear what they wanted to report out on. I know a lot of us here are elementary school, but I don't know if you've heard about the whole Berkeley High School getting caught of not having PE. And so now they have to do a 7th period, and oh my God, how are they going to?
If that is the direction they go, I mean, we don't actually know yet that wasn't committed to necessarily. So
yeah, it's been put on pause until next year. So the plan is being discussed this year of what they're going to do. They got an exemption for this year, for this school year.
Yes, but by
right,
the
but
time
I think
our
one of the
elementary school
options is
our kids
7
get up
periods.
there, it's going to be our reality. So it's going to, I don't know if we want to talk about it and how to influence where our kids are, but it's big.
It is.
Yes.
It is. And it's also a blow to the music program, right? Because you have to do 2 years of language and in high school. And now with the PE requirements, it's making it so that kids are more likely to have to either take a gap in their music, or I don't think they'll be able to do any other elective. So again, you know, it's really putting the squeeze on the music program, which was really intended to go through 12th grade.
Yeah.
And we have to be careful because the block schedules can be very different based on what they pick. So there are certain models that are being suggested that have already failed at other local schools. So we have to be aware about what bell schedules actually mean for our kids.
Okay. Well, we're 8:59 doing time check. Questions? Hey, Rita, you want to wrap up?
All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming tonight, and we will see you all next month. And we'll be sending out, hopefully, like I said, on our calendar ongoing for the year as well.
Definitely reach out to Rita and I there's just so many nuances, right? Reach out to us if you want to just talk about your school situation and just kind of just work things out. We're happy to be a resource.
Yeah. Yeah. Overall, council is more about connecting between and across schools. But we also recognize that, you know, again, like with the construction issues, like we're all going to be going through that sooner or later. And so there's more of a focus on construction with the schools that are actually dealing with it in this moment, hopefully to improve things as we move forward.
Okay. Great. One of our learnings to get people to come back, end on time. So,
right.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Good to see you. hope to see you again next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.